Just how intently is the market watching out for what's to be unveiled in the budget speech later today? Is there anything in particular the market will be reacting to?
Abimbola. Sorry, Alicia, I lost you for a second. I didn't hear that.
Just looking at today, of course, we've got the budget speech in full focus, even though President Umaro Yar'Adua will not be presenting it himself. Just how intently is the market looking towards what's being announced today?
I think the key drivers, morning Alicia, sorry, the key drivers in the budget spend has always been around infrastructure spend as well as spending on power, which account for more than 50% of the budget last year. And we'd expect that this year the proportion should remain the same. We'd expect an increase in the budget actually over the 3.1 trillion of last year. And we'd also expect the proportion allocated to infrastructure and power spend to be fairly significant.
Of course, we know that the common theme when it comes to most budget speeches on the continent that ignites interest surrounds infrastructure spend. With that in mind, we've got cement plays for one in focus. What's your view on the likes of Dangote Cement and CCNN in this context?
Yeah, I think definitely the cement players, I think 50% of cement consumed in the country is actually imported. But with the government's announcement to restrict cement importation, that's definitely good news for the likes of the Dangotes and the CCNN and the Lafarge WAPCOs as well. Subsequently, we can see in that sector, a drive to increase capacity with spending on new plants. For example, Lafarge WAPCO as well as the Bua Group through CCNN have made plans to actually increase their capacity, and that would come into effect by 2011. So we'd expect them to be riding on the increased demand for cement in the market.
And then naturally, some of that focus would shift to the construction players as well. Just looking at the two that are listed on the NSE, we've got Julius Berger, of course, and Kappa Alberto. What's your view on those counters?
I think most of the those are definitely big players in terms of infrastructure projects issued by the federal government. So we'd expect some interest in those two stocks as well, following the announcement of the budget. However, historically, those stocks, in terms of their volatility, they remain quite stable and very little activity in those two stocks.
Just how intently do market players in Nigeria actually scrutinize order books and the project pipelines that these players boast? I mean, what are some of the things you're looking at? Are you looking at quality versus quantity on these order books?
Definitely. Quality is definitely preferred over quantity. Historically, the federal government have been very slow to pay on projects, so we'll definitely be looking at the quality of the order books. Having said that, it's not very transparent, the sort of pipeline of projects that some of these construction companies have. So it's very difficult to actually make a judgment call based on their order books.
In the meantime, there's quite a lot of news surrounding the oil sector that's been making headlines. We saw ExxonMobil being granted leases of a further 20 years with the option to renew again on 3 shallow water facilities over in Nigeria. What have you made of that news?
Contrary to the concerns in the sector, when there was some interest from a Chinese company looking to acquire some of the oil assets in Nigeria, I think the fact that Mobil have been granted an extension to their operating license is actually good news, and I think it should allay some of the fears that we've seen being exhibited by some of the oil majors in the country, the likes of Total, Shell, and as well as Mobil.
Of course, contract renewal negotiations, sorry to interrupt, between Nigeria and its Western oil parties have been difficult, with China also looking to gain a stronger foothold in the Nigerian oil sector. But some had suggested that this was possibly just the Nigerian government trying to play the one off the other. What's your view on the status of things in that regard, in terms of the potential for Chinese ties being forged over these long-standing Western relationships?
I think definitely that was the message that was sent when they made an announcement, when the Chinese made the announcement to acquire some of the assets, oil assets in the country. And then there was lots of speculation as to whether that would be done at the expense of the existing oil majors that have invested in the country. But I think as long as there's transparency over the award of licenses going forward, I'm sure it's not going to be a case of playing one against the other to try and strike the best deal.
In the meantime, we saw Total Nigeria out with numbers yesterday. Profit after tax increasing just over 16.5%. Market reaction to those numbers?
Market reaction was actually quite muted. We didn't see a movement in the share price. And generally speaking, there's very little volatility in the on movement in share price in the oil sector. So really, as much as they've made this announcement, we'd expect there to be very little movement in the share price, just given the historical trend of Total's share price.